Okay. Thank you for coming. Today I will continue from where I left last week. Last week we were examining the human eye and the spectrum. I will briefly go over that. This was the spectrum of the daylight. You see some blue part. When we think about fluorescence, including the infrared, and when we think about fluorescent light, we have other shapes as well. For the LEDs, like this LED spectrum, so one in blue and one in the yellow-green area and reddish area. So the light coming to the objects determine what we see. The light comes in and it is reflected and goes to our eye, and therefore we see and we perceive objects. So quickly the vision occurs here. Upside down, and that basically corresponds to cones. And here, rods are sensitive to movement and black and white, whereas cones are sensitive to more information, and they are densely arranged around the fovea.
Hocam ekran gözükmüyor bizde ama.
Çok geç söylemediniz mi?
Sorun bende mi
Evet.
diye bir baktım da
Ben-
başka arkadaşlarda da varmış.
Ekranı paylaşıyorum.
Hocam sesiniz de bazen bir gidiyor. Garip geliyor sesiniz de. Bende mi kaynaklı bilmiyorum da.
Bağlantım iyi gösteriyor ama. Bir dakika.
Şimdi geldi
Ekran-
görüntü.
Ekran paylaşımını göremiyorum. Ben bir şey yapmadım ama. Bakalım bir dakika. Ben kameramı kapatayım. Ben müfitimi biraz daha kuvvetlendiririm. How is it now?
Şu an görüntü var.
Geliyor mu? Okay. So we have cones and we have rods. Rods are sensitive to black and white. And sensitive to color. Green and blue. That's why we say primary colors are made up of red, green, and blue. So it's this area that receives the light, and the backside processes and sends information to the human brain. in middle layer, this is quite interesting, and it does some filtering and reduction, by reduction to enhance vision. So information. There is an interesting part. The green corresponds to cones here, whereas reds corresponds to roads in the graph. So as you see, there are hundreds of thousands of cones per millimeter square, and not that many cones. Cones are only available at the center. Therefore, we have to rotate our eyes. We have to rotate our eyes in order to see. That's important. We see RGB colors, as I said, because we have 3 different types of sensors in our eyes, and when a particular frequency is given to human eye, these sensors are stimulated accordingly with certain amounts. If we stimulate those cells separately by providing different colors from the same point, then same kind of stimulus is reproduced, and then we see these colors are the same. So even though no orange is present here, we see it as orange because our eye is only sensing 3 different wavelengths. And it's not like a square band, it's kind of a triangle. So when you have a wavelength here, such as 660, some red and some green is stimulated. So certain amounts are stimulated, and the ratio of this mixture determines the color that we see. So basically, we send RGB and the frequency to the testing person, and if they say same, then we mark that RGB corresponds to certain frequency. And this is done by experiment. So it's not a mathematical calculation. It's done by experiment. So when you plot that, usually each device, because the thing you are using here is RGB generator. That RGB generator could be CRT, could be LCD, could be laser, anything. Therefore, we mark it as a color gamut like this, and that corresponds to different input device, different output devices. For example, we see a TV here. On the TV, you have small red, green, blue dots. Each of them is made up of red phosphorus, green phosphorus, and blue phosphorus, which are not perfect. So this imperfection usually creates different color gamuts, color diagrams for different devices. And the blind spot that we were talking about is here, basically. So somewhere around this direction, we have blind spots. Now, this is where we left last time. When there is a lighting change, our eyes has to adapt. So our cones and rods have certain adaptation speed. Adaptation speed is fast for the rods, slow for the cones. So when the illumination changes, our eyes retina adapts. It is like an automated gain control. This helps us to pre-process certain information. The pre-processing abilities in the eye, not in the brain, are as follows: edge enhancement, color separation. I have talked about it briefly last week. Data reduction, compression, and movement detection. And furthermore, rods and cones are wired separately in the eye. So we have a black and white system and color system. And these black and white system and color system are wired separately and also intelligently, just like a color TV, which is backward compatible. Which is black and white. The question is, why am I focusing on this too much? Because these properties has positive and negative effects on how we perceive things in front of us, on screen, on devices, and our surroundings. One of the things that is quite interesting is the edge enhancement. These are the cells that are affected by certain signals. This part is dark, this part is bright. So these are the cells that are getting, and there are processing cells connected to. It is like a simple neural network. And most of you are familiar with neural networks because of the artificial intelligence classes you are taking. So there are cells in between, and these are processing information and feeding back to final cells. These final cells have number variation here because there is edge enhancement when there are differences. There are subtracting and adding cells together at each node. Therefore, when you have a signal like this, okay, so this is white, this is black, or lighter, darker, it does something like that. So therefore, edges are more perceivable. This is called as edge enhancement. Is that clear? So typical outcome of this is as follows. When you look at this closely, you will see black spots here. Do you see that? These black spots are result of edge enhancement. Again, black and white background with the same gray is perceived differently because the change in the edge is in the opposite direction. So edges are enhanced. Therefore, sometimes sizes appear differently. One of them looks smaller than the other. One of them looks brighter than the other because there is a pre-processing going on. All these interesting images that you see on the internet that we pass to each other for, I mean, do you see the girl here and do you see the animal in the image and do you see the number, etc., or how many numbers you can see in the image? Those kind of things are all results of these pre-processing stages of our vision system. And furthermore, as explained last time, our eyes are wired to the brain separately. Black and white is wired separately than the color. So our wiring system is not RGB, it is YIQ. In the TV system, we have YIQ color transmission. One channel is luminance. There is a red, green, and yellow, blue channels. So again, it is 3 components, but this is only for black and white. The additional 2 is a function of red, green, and blue, so that you can re-extract the information. Which animal was okay? Which animal was capable of seeing black and white? Was it dogs? I think it is dogs. So with this configuration, if you take out a human eye and plug it in as a dog's eye, and technically it is impossible, but let's say when you do it, it will start functioning as black and white because the dog brain is wired only for black and white. Therefore, even the eye is capable of generating the RGB. It still functions as black and white because there is black and white signal generating cable going to the brain. So what do we do with the colors? We use colors for marking things on the interfaces. However, entirely relying on color in the interface is incorrect. Okay? You have to provide additional cues, such as writing only stop here will be incorrect. So it should be complemented with the color, and color should be complemented with additional signals, additional cues. We use them for marking important things, critical functions. We use them for marking state, hot, cold, good, bad, full, empty. We use them for marking important functions, critical functions. So if it is critical, it is usually associated with red. If it is kind of good, it is associated with green or blue. It is different. Sometimes green is good, sometimes blue is good, sometimes blue is cold. When the cold is good, it's okay, but sometimes cold is bad. Also, in the cultural arena, in Asian countries, red is not associated with bad. Red is associated with mainly good. So in the Western societies, red associates with blood, human blood, then it is related to danger, death, etc. But in Asian culture, it is associated with prosperity, food, etc. So when you mark something with red, it doesn't make the same effect. So these critical buttons are, for example, on this, is for basically pulsating operations. Chop, grate, grind, stir, etc. So these are push ones, but these are switches. So they used color to separate switches from the buttons. Reds are buttons, whites are switches. This is the only document I can find officially. That's the answer document for the color indication. Usually red is associated with danger and stop. Orange and orange-red is biosafety. Yellow is associated with caution. Orange is warning. Green is safety. Blue is information. Black, white, black, yellow. These are boundary markings like school bus signs. And purple, magenta, and yellow together is radiation and other kinds of dangers. So basically red, orange, yellow, blue, green. These are the common meanings associated with colors in Western societies. Human eye doesn't work like a measuring device. It compares relative intensities. For example, consider we can illuminate the screen between 0 and 1. 0 means black, 1 means white, full intensity, and 0 intensity. So something dark gray, 0.1. So when you increase from 0.1 to 0.11, you are increasing it 0.01. So your eye can measure it. Okay. When you're increasing from 0.5 to 0.55, the change is 0.05. So 5 times bigger change. But that change, these two changes are perceived as equal changes because we are measuring the relative difference, not the absolute difference. So when you are increasing something, it is increased with respect to the previous value, not as an absolute value. Therefore, when you are playing with the intensity, when you are playing with the color in the interface, increasing, decreasing, etc., make the scales not based on absolute values, but relative values. Because otherwise, some in-between values are not significant, not going to have significant effect. They don't get perceived similarly. So since our eye perceives light comparatively, we use inverse logarithmic illumination in order to provide the linear reception. Okay, so same is true for the hearing. Furthermore, output devices have nonlinear output performance of light, which should also be compensated like gamma correction. So in computer graphics class, maybe you will see there is a gamma issue between output devices, and the thing that you see on different output device, like the different monitors, create different images, different image colorings and perception, because those gammas are different, even if the graphics card are the same. Any questions? Mustafa, görüntü geldi mi? Mert.
Evet geldi hocam.
Tamam, sağ ol.
Teşekkür ederim.
Arada tıkırtı falan yapabilirsiniz. Çünkü karşımda olduğunuzu şey yapıyorum. Şu an yüzlerinizi görüyorum zaten, çift ekrandayım. So now we are back to visible angle. That's Mustafa Mert's project, I think, right? We move our eyes. Yeah, we move our eyes to center active image on the condensed region of the eyes. Since our eyes have, this is front, this is back, has vision here. So if there is a guy here, that guy's image is created at the back upside down. So only this part is seeing. Other parts are seeing, but not very good. Therefore, we have to rotate our eyes up and down, left and right, so that we can capture information about the point of interest. Therefore, we rotate our eyes. With the roads, the person next to your car looks at you and you recognize because of the rod cells, not the cone cells. And how good we see? The magic number is 2 degrees. So the eye without rotation, do you understand? Without rotation, only 2 degrees is visible. So anything in 2 degrees we can perceive. Above that, we have to rotate our eyes. Mesela Metehan gözlerini oynatıyor. So anything in 2 degrees is visible. This is highly related to the font size that we have to use, because without moving our eyes, only 2 degrees is visible. Hasta değilseniz tabii. So from the 60 centimeters, that is what people measured, 12-point font corresponds to 0.15 degrees. 6-point font corresponds to 0.8. For the 8-point font, 65. So with the 12-point font, how many letters we can fit to 2 degrees? You tell me. The answer is, evet Mustafa.
It's about how far we are or how big is the writing.
Well, from
Examples.
60 centimeters.
I don't know actually. Do I need to calculate?
Let me do it. 14 characters. So 14 characters I can read without moving my eye at 12 point. At 14 point, it goes down. It's probably 11. At 16 point, it's probably 8. Okay. On the other hand, when you decrease it to 9 point, it's probably 18. 18 characters without moving our eye. And each movement is like this. You look, then you move, look, move, look, move, look, move, look. So it is like this. You move and you stop, and you move and you stop. Okay? So this movement takes about 15 to 30 milliseconds, whereas waiting takes about, because you have to see, waiting takes about 100 to 150 milliseconds. Okay? Move and stop. Move and stop. These are called as saccades, and stoppings are called as fixations. So fixation, saccade, fixation, saccade. And we see during the fixation. We don't see during the saccade. In order to give something quickly readable, what should we do? Or in order to speed up our reading speed, what should we do? Probably I should make the letter smaller. When I make the letters smaller, then number of fixations required to cover the text is reduced because of the 2-degree principle. The outcomes are, these are some numerical values. You are not responsible from these, but 1.5 times 10 to the 6 nerves for each eye is interesting number. Number of cones per millimeter square is this. And number of rods in each retina, 10 to the 8. Number of cones in each retina, 10 to the 6. So how many megapixels we have? It is actually 5 megapixel color total, but since the density is nonlinear and it is focused on 2 degrees area, it's much more sensitive than it's much more sensitive than 5 megapixels because you rotate our eyes. And this is 100 megapixel rod. So going back to, so reading occurs like this. Here move, stop, move, stop, move, stop, and go back. Move, stop, move, stop, move, stop, go back. As you read a text, these are the lines. This is how our eyes move. Therefore, if you try to reduce number of stops by any means, it improves reading speed. Also, when you have these flybacks happen at once to the correct position, then reading becomes easier. That's why we have newspapers with multiple columns rather than single column, because you read it like this, it's much faster. If you want to read a long text, and when you fly back, it becomes very difficult to go to the correct place in one flyback. Therefore, you either fail and start with the incorrect line, or you spend more time to adjust your eye to the correct line, which is the line after the previous line. Therefore, this is much better. And the optimal line length, they found it like 13 centimeters, 13 point something centimeters, which is quite similar to small books, small pocket traditional book size is quite easy to read. So when you're making a web page, do not put long text. Rather, divide it into regions. Put different things in regions, so each of them will be read separately, like newspapers. Then it will be much easier and quicker to read them. That's the reason. Now, going back to color blindness, 8% of men and 1% of women are colorblind. I'm sure we have colorblind person in our class right now, and they probably don't know, or they know but they don't care. That's okay. It's just like it's just a difference. Red-green blindness is the most common one among men. And this is, since we have RGB, one or two, usually these two, one or two types are missing. So colorblind people perceive things on the left as things on the right. If you are colorblind, you will still see these two pictures differently, because each of them is also generating signals. But if you are colorblind, these two will be perceived different than what general population perceives. Okay, what do we see here? Yazabilirsiniz. Görüyorum yazdıklarınızı. Açık chat pencerem. Bir şey sorarsanız da oradan da sorabilirsiniz yani. 29 Şeyma. Sağda
I couldn't see the right side. Shit.
Okay, so you shouldn't see anything on the right if you are not colorblind. So if you see something, then you are colorblind. Evet Serhat. So 29, okay. I'm just joking. 29 is fine here. Here I don't know, probably 41 or 45. I don't see it. So the outcome of this is 8% of man population and 1% of the woman population is colorblind. So we cannot rely on color in our interfaces all the time. We have to use color as additional factor, not the only factor, because they are colorblind. And one thing is, when people are making web pages, having different color doesn't mean that it is readable, because the colors are different, but our eyes are basically works with respect to intensities, with respect to amount of light. Therefore, it is not only the color that makes difference, it is the intensity of coming light, the luminance, the amount of light emitted by the object. Therefore, there must be adequate enough luminance difference, which is here, luminance difference, in order to see something well. Otherwise, there is a signal here, but it is not as perceivable as the other one. There is no contrast. There is color contrast, but there is no luminance contrast. And this is what we call luminance contrast. This is what we say color contrast. Colors are different. And there are negative contrast and positive contrast. Negative contrast is black on white. Positive contrast means white on black. Some of you like dark screens. Some of you like white screens when you are coding. White is easier. Positive contrast is difficult to read. The intensity has huge effect in perception. When you don't have enough contrast, intensity contrast, it is not as effective. So try to give adequate intensity contrast. This is not cool. Okay. Again, intensity contrast is good. Only color contrast is not good. This is only usable when you really need it. If you really need it, then it's fine. But still, this red must be darker. It's not dark enough. This is the disaster. Some of you do this in the graduation projects. Please don't. Do not display text only with chromatic differences to the background. For example, red on green, red on blue, red or green on gray. Please don't. It might be readable, but it is very difficult. The combination colors are available on websites. When you do search with visual communication, on Google and search for complementary colors, you will get much more information about visual design and what kind of colors you have to use. I wouldn't say have to, but you better use when designing interfaces. Again, in order to represent the shape, do not rely on color. This is no good. Intensity is better. Or together. Only color difference. Do not only rely on color difference is very bad. I don't say make it black and white, but I will say use intensity, use luminance value. So let's go back to reasons that we use color to label items, to indicate the variable value like this, to discriminate different items, make a real life analogy, like red is associated with hot, blue is associated with cold. For the heating, we don't use green and red. We use blue and red because it is more related to cold and hot. When things are related to safety and unsafety, good and bad, nice and not nice, go and stop, green and red is probably on edges. Sometimes we use orange and yellow in the middle, like we use in the traffic lights. Usually it is in the middle. Sometimes green is low value. Sometimes green is high value. For example, here, green is high value and it is good, like a full. But sometimes having something small is good. In that case, this part will be green and this part will be red. So it will be the opposite side. You will decide based on the parameters. We have an interesting effect named as Stroop effect. It happens from time to time to us. It happens from time to time. It is a demonstration of interference in the reaction times and success rate of tasks based on perceptible information. The thing says blue in text, but its color is not blue. So when I try to identify how many blue words are there, I will have difficulty This difficulty is called as Stroop effect. And it creates problems in examples like as follows. My favorite of these three colors is fern green, forest green, chill blue. So you have to think about colors, but they are labeled with different colors than actual answer. So it creates a conflict. This conflict may reduce the performance of the, in this case, student or child or the person. So that interference also happens with audio. Typically, in the CIE diagram, Center for International Éclairage, and it is determined in when 1936, the standard. So edges contain rainbow. Rainbow frequencies are on the edges. Anything that we can see is the staying inside human eye. Maybe some animal have different type. So usually there is a red part, blue part, and green part. And with the three color generator source, we make a triangle, and anything in the triangle is visible by that device. These colors outside of the triangle cannot be generated by that device. So if you have a good device, good brand, more expensive ones, usually they use sources which are closer to edges. If it is cheap, they are closer to the middle. With the generation, we have red, green, blue model. If we simultaneously generate red and green together, we perceive it as yellow. If we simultaneously generate blue and green, we perceive it as cyan. If we simultaneously generate blue and red, we perceive it as magenta. If we produce them all together, then we perceive it as white. But this is opposite for the ink. With the ink, we have cyan, magenta, and yellow inks. If you paint magenta ink, assume that my brush is magenta. It's a paint. Okay, light comes in. What is a paint? Does it generate light? No. Ömer, does it generate light? Probably no. So it reflects light, but absorbs some other light. So when you paint something, it only determines the absorption because it is not a light source. You can only change absorption. So Green absorbing is called as magenta. Blue absorbing is called as yellow. Red absorbing is called as cyan. So if the paint is absorbing red, it is cyan color. If it is absorbing blue, we call it yellow. Yellow is actually absorbing blue out of white. So printing industry uses ink, therefore uses CMY model. And the K is used for the black as a black ink because the black ink is more cheaper. When you have equal amount of CMY, instead of using equal amount of CMY because it is black, we use black ink other than different color inks. Yani 3 ayrı mürekkep yerine sadece siyah kullanabilirsin. Aynı miktar olursa. So the combination colors are Galatasaray, Fenerbahçe, and Trabzonspor. These are primary color contrast values. These primary color contrasts are usually correspond to different edges or the color gamut, color diagram. Because when you combine this color and this color, you get something closer to white because there is white in the middle. So anything that generates white when you combine at equal amounts or proportional amounts, we call them complementary color. This is an example for the intensity contrast. Same color, but different levels of illumination. Same color. Different levels of illumination in gray. Depending on the interface, you may need warm-cold correlation. So warm versus cold, warm versus cold, warm versus cold. These are warm-cold contrast values. Like far, near, close, far away. Again, complementary contrasts are these twos in color wheel, which are helpful in designing user interface dialogues. When you're designing interfaces, we have a saturation value. Saturation means how much white is present in the color signal. Normally, 400 nanometer, 700 nanometer, and this is our band. This is what we see. If you have this, technically, normally it's not flat, but let's say technically, this is white. If you have something like this, what color is it? Green. Right? How about this? It is also green. It is also green, but different green. This is also greenish. Other frequencies are present, but not much dominant frequency. So as you get concentrated on certain frequency, your saturation goes up. So it's more saturated and focuses to the single dominant frequency at one point. This is interesting. Colors are not all the same. For example, when you want to mix this violet and green, the ratios are different. Some colors are saying I'm here. Some colors are not saying I'm here. Therefore, the values have different presence quantity contrasts. For example, yellow for 9, orange for 8, red for 6, violet 3, blue 4, green 6. So when you want to use red and violet together, we need to use 6:3 ratio in terms of the area in order to provide the same kind of recognition. Otherwise, one color will be dominant in the interface, in the picture, whatever you design. So there are other examples like hue contrast, warm cold contrast, light dark contrast. Depending on what kind of variable and parameter are using, maybe you are drawing a graph, maybe this corresponds to population. If this corresponds to population, which one is the high population? Highest population. If high population is good, then this is high population. But if high population is bad, if we are talking about African countries and poverty, etc., then high population areas must be red. So it has to correspond to the variable itself. We have an elections coming in Turkey, local elections, and I'm sure you remember the parties are represented by different colors on the map, and some TV channels are using very badly selected colors. So understanding what is going on becomes very difficult because color association doesn't correspond to party association. So meaning association is not present and understanding becomes more difficult. This is interesting. This is what we say simultaneous contrast. This is gray. But our eyes automatically create some other color because of the surrounding color. So we don't perceive it as pure gray. We perceive it as something like bluish. Okay. When you need three colors together, they suggest you to choose split complementary colors, some amount of this and some other two amount of this, or some amount of this and some other two amount of this. And the combinations are here. These combinations can be used together in the interfaces. That's what they say. So it's good for the eye. When you use colors for labeling, you should be able to tell the names. You should be able to tell, push the red button, push the pink button. And we don't have that many color names. So these are our options for labeling. Not that much. This is an interesting thing. Dinliyorsunuz değil mi? Bir yoklama alayım. Okay. Blue text on red background is hard to read. Red text on blue background is also hard to read. Don't do it. And the question is, the question is, what is going on? What is going on is as follows. A signal comes out from this point, refracts from the lens, and just like the prism, our lens in the eye is also made up from the material. Any material is not perfect, so it creates some deviation. Blue is more refracted more, and red is refracted less. You understand? Therefore, our retina cannot get exact image. Some focusing happens early, some other focusing happens late. So it is imperfect. Therefore, using these kind of edge frequencies are not good. We better use frequencies that are closer to each other when writing like this, so that they focus equally on the retina. Reading is therefore difficult because focusing problem is significant. This thing is also visible in glasses that we wear, because the glasses we wear are made up of lenses. And the phenomenon is named as aberration, chromatic aberration. And each lens have a Abbe number. Okay? When you are purchasing eyeglasses, there is an Abbe number. These Abbe numbers can range from 30 to as far as I know, 65. Okay, so 65 is very good. That means not much dispersion. But 30 makes a lot of dispersion. So focusing becomes more difficult. You will see some rainbow effect on the edges of the vision. Therefore, high AB number is good. Unfortunately, when you have organic lenses, lighter lenses, and lenses that are thinner with higher index of refraction, AB number goes down. And when the index of refraction is higher, AB number goes down, so color distortion becomes bigger. This is extremely significant in telescopes. When you purchase cheap telescopes, even the expensive telescopes, when you look at the moon or stars, you see some rainbow colors. Do you remember? Those rainbow colors are due to this aberration effect, and our eyes also suffer from the same phenomenon. Therefore, people invented, not Galileo, people invented mirror-based telescopes so that aberration is not present and they can make bigger magnification. With optical telescopes, magnification is very difficult, and production of lenses with high AB number is very difficult. That is the reason where people are having difficulty in finding lenses for unmanned military planes, because those lenses have very high magnification ratio, and at that magnification ratio, chromatic aberration distorts the image so much that you cannot get any information from the back. Red light does not prevent the eye to adapt to the dark. Bu yüzden gece kulüpleri kırmızı olur diyeceğim ama o kötü bir espri olacak. Because roads do not respond to the red. Okay? So we should use red light for instruments or information that are viewed at night and should not spoil the dark adoption. What is that? Military. In military, any kind of display for the vehicles or for the equipment that is used for the night must be equipped with red interfaces, because when you are looking at red interfaces, your night vision is not affected that much. If it is blue or white or green, then your retina should adjust. So captain can gain full dark adapted vision if you have red display. Unfortunately, our cars, today's cars, have commercial interests, and they make full of displays everywhere. But my suggestion all the time is reduce dashboard light by adjusting the level of light so that you can see outside better. Also, fog lights. Some people turn on fog lights in order to see better. However, it is the opposite, because with the car, this is the fog light, this is the regular light, okay, this is the driver going this way. When you turn on the fog light, it creates an illumination here, which is very bright. You may feel that there is more light in front of you, and you might be happy. But since there is a high level of illumination in front, your retina adjusts at that level of illumination, and far objects cannot be seen because it is not dark anymore. Therefore, you should turn off your fog lights so that your eye can adjust to the far illumination, which is darker. Okay? Although the road appears to be darker, your eyes can see better, because at the end of the day, you need to see the person which is far away. You don't have to see the road, you have to see objects. That is again for the directly result of the light adoption. When this is, I already explained, when I reading the text, I go, stop, go, stop, go, stop, go, stop, and each of them must be smaller than 2 degrees. Usually it is around or smaller than 2 degrees. It is also depending on difficulty, and if you are reading the foreign language, your eye patterns are different. So I can tell by looking at the eye movements whether the language is a foreign language or native language to you, because eye movements change. Reading is affected by visual angle, illumination, color contrast, line length, upper and lower case, and familiarity and the language. Optimal line length is between 60 and 13 millimeters, which is 6 centimeters to 13 centimeters. Text printed in capitals was read 14% slower than lowercase text. This is important. So uppercase is more difficult. Uppercase is effective for emphasizing isolated words. If you want to emphasize isolated thing, or if you want people to read slower or attention, then make it uppercase. Reading from computer screen is slower than from the book, done by Ben Schneiderman in 1998, and it tells us that when we are preparing information for the internet consumption or web consumption or mobile consumption, it has to be shorter. It has to be shorter than paper. So if people give you catalogs or brochures to make the web page, you need to reduce it 30%. You need to make it readable so that people can read it at the same time. Otherwise, people cannot read it. So it has to be reduced, and it also has to be separated by bullets and more paragraphs. Otherwise, people get lost. Now, let me continue with the Gestalt laws, and then maybe we can stop there. The word Gestalt means pattern, so it is not a person's name. First, when you first hear it, Gestalt laws, Gestalt, like, give me a German name. Hans Gestalt. No, it's not true. It is the pattern. There are 7 rules describe the way we see patterns in visual displays. Proximity, similarity, continuity, symmetry, closure, relative size, figure, and ground. Okay, I'm going to go over them. And typically, these can be asked during the exam question. What are the Gestalt laws, and explain what the continuity means with an example or something like that. This is what proximity tells us. Things that are close together are perceived as a group. Here we see dots or lines. Do we see dots or do we see lines? We see lines because lines are formed in our brain. Lines are formed in our brain because they are formed with some proximity rules. Our brain associates them as lines. This is what proximity principle, Gestalt principle, is. We correlate things. For example, yes, no, maybe. Okay, so 3 buttons on the interface, yes, no, maybe. We automatically correlate them, and we automatically group them in our minds, and we try to make an exclusive selection among 3. Although they are different buttons, our brain perceives it as a group. Also, closeness based on density. These are perceived as a different group than the others. So typical data mining problem. Our brain divides them into 2 different classes, which is type group B and group A. Group A is here, group B is the others. So different tasks and different meanings are given to those objects by our brain. This is a complex interface, and there are things, and your brain has to process it and respond to it. And responding and processing is based on these principles. The similarity is also interesting. Do we have lines here? Apparently no, but we form lines ourselves because of similarity properties of the objects. So objects that are similar to each other forms a group, and that group may form a shape and may give another meaning, additional meaning. This principle can be used to design a table, for example, table design without grid lines. Without grid lines, table is possible too, just by giving different shapes. grouping similar elements by our perception. Next Gestalt principle is the continuity. Continuity states that the smooth and continuous visual elements are more likely to be perceived as the entity than ones that contain abrupt changes in direction. Our brain likes continuity. We love continuity. Therefore, when we see something like this, we perceive it as the next one, but not the other one. Although this is quite possible, the part C is quite possible, we don't perceive it like that. We perceive it like B. Or it is perceived as a continuous thing. Because the real world is mostly continuous. The typical outcome of this is when you group things, group switches, buttons, etc. When you connect them together with a line, they are perceived as a member of a group. If this line doesn't exist, these are perceived as group because they are closer. But when you connect them with a visual line, then this becomes, for example, on, this becomes off, on, off. So how am I going to interpret this? Left, right, or up, down? If they are connected visually, then left, right. Now I am creating additional cue, unfortunately, because I am writing. If I increase this over the other, then it becomes up-down. Perception becomes up-down rather than left-right. Again, it is beyond the color. If the connection is not present, it is usually like this. But if there is a connection is stronger. Continuity is stronger, like this. Left, right. It is important in diagrams, drawings, user interfaces, encapsulations, etc. Next one is the symmetry. In order to memorize and learn, we try to look symmetries. Symmetric things are learned easily. Therefore, this shape and this shape is much easier to understand, easier to remember than this shape. Asymmetric shapes are difficult to remember. Symmetric shapes are easier to remember. Therefore, our brain tries to group symmetrical figures and try to reduce data and store it as a single element, which is symmetric. So storage of these images are easier. Closure. Do I have curve or a circle? Circle. Although it is not, but it is circle. So our brain tries to form well-known shapes. So it has to be closed, finished, intact. Therefore, human brain tends to close contours that have gaps in them. Those gaps doesn't mean anything. Which one is at the background? black on white or white on black? The answer is small ones are usually perceived as, when you are looking from here, small ones are perceived as they are on the top. So this is perceived as black on white. If the black is bigger than the white area, then white becomes the foreground and black becomes the background. So when you are trying to make an interface, background and the content sometimes races with each other, and the area proportion is critical for correct understanding. Similar principle, named as figure and ground. A figure is a pattern that is perceived as an object that is being in the foreground. The ground is the space behind the figure. Human brain tends to pick out forms based on the previous knowledge. Do we see vase here, or do we see two people? Anket mi yapalım? Bakayım anket yapabiliyor muyum? Ahmet ışığın açık kararmışsınız.
Hocam ekran siyah olunca ışık da gitti.
Tamam, sıkıntı yok. Eylemler ve uygulamalar. Tümünü göster. Poly. İzin vermem gerekiyormuş. Yapamadım. Şuradan yapıyordum.
Hocam ki mesaj atın, onlara biz emoji bırakalım.
Ben de onu diyecektim.
Evet. Neyse. Sonra yaparız. Doğru. Şöyle. Birinci mesaj two face. Diğeri de ways. Burada sizin your previous experiences and previous learning and experience determines your behavior. Next, the fonts, outcome of the Gestalt principles. 15'e 10. Outcome of the Gestalt principles. When we make two symbols at the same size, they don't look like at the same size, because human eye we perceive area. Since we perceive area, we have to make small adjustments, such as bottom line of this font goes forward than the N. Otherwise, we perceive O as little upwards. This is especially interesting in font design. Good font design is very critical for good reading. Therefore, optical weights, optical alignments must be studied by font designers. When you are designing screen elements with equal sizes, all the heights are the same, but this looks smaller. So this screen element is looking smaller. Therefore, we need to make them bigger, little bit bigger, so that optically, perceptually, it is perceived as the same. Because the area of this bigger than the area of the others. So we perceive based on the area, we don't measure sizes. Again, interesting thing, and font design and allocation, the space between letters must be adjusted based on the font. It has to be variable. Otherwise, it will not look like easy to read. To make it easier to read, it has to be proportionally, not the proportion of the fonts, the proportion of the space, because this space these spaces affect how we perceive the word. So it has to be adjusted. This is also Gestalt, the outcome of the Gestalt principle. Let me stop here and finish for today. If you have any questions, let me stop recording.